So as you might be able to tell, because everything looks a bit different, or back to normal, I am back home at my parents' house. So we are reaching the end of December, meaning we are reaching the end of the year, and so this video will be about the books that I have read this year. I have read about 26 books in 2014, and I am going to list all of them. This is not going to be in like order that I read them, but we're doing it in other ways. Start with the books that I've read by Lauren Oliver. I started with Panic. I didn't really know a lot about this book. It was a friend of mine who gave it to me for my birthday. Other books by Lauren Oliver, I also read the entire Delirium series this year, which is Delirium, Pandemonium, and Requiem. This series I loved. The story really intrigued me. I only knew like the basics of where the first book was about. I didn't know where the story would go, and I found it really interesting the way it did. And then I got really frustrated at the end because really you can't end a series like that. I'd kind of like to show that to my teacher at school right now because she would be so against. She'd just be like, no, that's not how it works. Another author that I've read several books by is Rachel Hawkins. I started reading Hex Hall. I've been seeing these books and I've been kind of interested in what they might be about, and so I've read the first 2.5 of the third, and then I kind of lost interest and I didn't finish, and I don't think I'm going to. But I also read Rebel Belle by Rachel Hawkins, which I did love and I did connect with the characters, and I'm so looking forward to reading the next one in this series. I also read The Maze Runner by James Dashner. I'd never heard of the book before I heard about the movie, and so I was planning like, I'm gonna read this book before the movie comes out, and then I never did, and so I kind of decided, okay, never mind, let's just see the movie. And I mentioned that to a friend, and they were like, oh, I was thinking this is a book that you would really like. And so, of course, I had to go and read it. I also started on the next book, but I haven't gotten very far with it. The 2 books that I read this year that I have been thinking about reading for a long time but never did was Unwind by Neal Shusterman and Shatter by, and I'm sorry if I say this wrong, Tahereh Mafi. Unwound I'm a bit unsure about. Like, I really liked it. I'm gonna start at that. I really liked the book. I didn't know too much about the story itself. I knew about kind of the process of unwinding, but I didn't know what the story was about. So I kind of came into it without much expectation, and I really liked it. And as I understand, it's a series, but I felt like I expected it to be a series, and I kept expecting the book to end. And then when it did end, I was like, well, this is finished. Like, this has reached a point where it's done. And so I'm still a bit unsure. I think it's a series. And whether it is or not, I'm probably not gonna read the next one because I feel kind of pleased with where the story ended and how it progressed. So I think I'm gonna leave it there. Shatter I had a lot harder time with. Like, I liked it, but I also did not. That's very vague, I'm sorry. It's very interesting the way it's written, how it's written from the way she sees things and with the scratched out parts. But I also didn't really feel the story and the characters. At like halfway through the book, I decided to, in my head, like, raise their ages by like 3 or 4 years, and suddenly the story worked so much better for me. But still, it wasn't really enough. I started on the next book, and I just kind of felt like the place where the first book ends, I feel like, wow, now the story's really getting going and getting to a point where I'm really interested. And then I started the next one, and it felt like from the last page of the first book to the first page in the second book, the main character had just kind of done this huge backstep and lost so much of her development from the first book, and I didn't feel like going through that again, and so I didn't continue that one. I finally read The Elites by Kiera Cass, which is the second book to The Selection. When I read The Selection, I felt so connected with America. Like, she is the first protagonist that I have really just like, I understand her, I get her, I'm so on board with her way of thinking and her development and her way. And then towards the end, I sort of lost that a little bit, partly because I don't understand her attraction to Aspen. Like, I feel like I've seen nothing that makes that work. So yeah, and I feel like she just kept going more towards a person that I didn't get in The Elite. And so I wasn't as excited about Elite as I was about The Selection. 2 of the biggest books for me this year was City of Heavenly Fire by Cassandra, which is the final book in the Mortal Instruments series. and I made an entire video ranting about that one, so I'm not going to talk much about it. The other one is The Blood of Olympus, the last book in the Heroes of Olympus series by Riordan. I could probably make a video ranting about that one too, but I'm not going to. The biggest read for me this year overall were the books by Richelle Mead, the Vampire Academy series and the Bloodline series. Holy crap, these books. Like, I actually, on my bookshelf, right next to where the camera is standing, have the first 4 books in Swedish, and I read them several years ago, and for some reason I got like halfway through the 4th book and then stopped and didn't continue, and I kept thinking that I should continue, but then, you know, I let it go for too long, so I couldn't quite remember what had happened in the first 3 books, and I just kept thinking that I probably stopped for a reason, and like, I wasn't too excited about it. But now I decided that I wanted to finish the series, and so I started listening to the audiobook, and I listened through them from the first book to the 6th book in the series, and I was, oh my god, I love these books so much, they are so good. And at the end of it, I was just like, oh my god, there's so much questions I have, there's so much more I would want to know. And then I looked it up, and there was the Bloodline series, which continues after the Vampire Academy series. So I went straight ahead and started listening to the then existing 4 books of the Bloodline series, which I listened through in like 5 days, and then started over again, because I had nowhere else to go from there. Like, there was no more books, so let's like start over. Since that point, there has been release of the 5th book in the series, Silver Shadows, and I have of course listened to that one as well. In the last 4 months, about since I moved, I have been in a very slump of reading, and I haven't really gotten through much. What I have read are 3 audiobooks, so I mean, depending on how much you pay attention and how focused you are on the book, I feel like listening to an audiobook is just as much worth as reading a book. It's just that when you read a book, it's harder to get distracted and detached from what you're actually reading. Like, if you get too distracted, you stop reading. Whilst with an audiobook, you can get distracted for 10 minutes and then you've missed 10 minutes of the book. The positive thing with audiobooks is the fact that you can do other things at the same time. If you easily get restless like I do, you can sit and just mindlessly play a game whilst you're listening, or you can listen while you're driving, or shopping, or going to school. So the 3 books that I read since I moved have been Young Elites by Marie Lu, which I didn't know too much about really when I started. It's just another book that I'd heard a lot of good things about, and I got really intrigued and I wanted to know what it was. And I found it so hard to determine whether or not I liked it or not, because it's so morally questionable. Like, every single character is morally questionable. Like, I can't even decide if, like, we're standing there with the main character kind of automatically on her side, and I can't determine if we're in the right or not, and I can't decide if any character is in the right or not. And in fact, I would probably have been super negative if it wasn't for the epilogue leading into the next book, because that really intrigued me, and I really want to read the next one because I want to know how that continues and where that leads. But before that part, where the book, this story actually ended, I just kind of felt like I didn't really like it. Mostly because I found it so hard to know if I like any of the characters, if I trust them, and if I wanted to go well for them or not. Another one was Gates, oh god, let's see if I get this one right. Gates of Thread and Stone by Lori M. Lee. And this one was really good. And it was a one-shot, and I didn't think it was. So this was also not one where I was kind of like expecting it to end kind of all the time. And it didn't, and it kept moving, and there was like resolution, and we found out stuff, and I'm so not used to reading books that are not part of a series and goes on for a long time, so I just like, oh my god, it ended! The book that has been the highlight since this summer has been The Secret Diary of Lizzie Bennet. Now, I'm a huge fan of the Lizzie Bennet Diary. I watched the series from the first episode being posted until the last one posting, and I was part of the Kickstarter, and I have the DVD set. And listening to this book, it was mostly just kind of like, oh well, I know the story, I'll listen to it as a general pastime, and it was so good. Like, I'd heard about this book, but I didn't really know what it was. I thought it was just kind of like, oh, let's take the Lizzie Bennet Diaries and write it down as a novel, basically. it wasn't. We get so much more information and such like little details that we didn't get in the videos because you don't get to see any of the other characters. It's such a different thing for it to be a retelling like it was in the vlogs to it being like really telling the story as it happens, kind of like Lizzie does when she recounts the things in book form compared to video form. Listening to this book, because audiobook once again, it's also read by the actress who plays Lizzie Bennet, and so it fits really well. I also, before City of Heavenly Fire came out, I listened through the audiobooks, the entire Mortal Instruments series and the entire Infernal Devices series, and I've read as much of Bane Chronicles as I could get a hold of, which wasn't all of it, but I know that that's gonna be resolved at Christmas. Because I was standing in the bookshop with my parents and I saw the Bane Chronicles and I was like, oh, I like this. And my dad was like, okay, look that way. So those are the books that I have read in 2014. I originally intended to wait to make this list until closer to New Year's, closer to the actual end of the year, but since I've been reading so slowly, I figured I'm probably not gonna get very many more books on this list before that. Currently I am reading Allegiant by Veronica Roth, the last book of the Divergent series, and I've not gotten very far, if you can tell, and I've had this book for a very long time. I might manage to finish this book this year, but I don't think it's going to be much more than that. I hope you've gotten through your fill of reading for this year as well and are looking forward to book releases for next year. I am. So, goodbye!